Hey everyone. Hey, Rick here from Port Zero. Hey, so what we're going to do is today we're going to do, as everybody knows, I love to do labs. I, have my own home lab that I've built with a lot of stuff involved with it. However, I really like to tackle other machines like Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, and another one that I found that's really, really good. And he's a good friend of mine, um, Tyler Ramsby. So I got to hang with him at DEF CON back in uh, back in August, and it was just a phenomenal experience out there. He is the founder of HackSmarter.org, and he's also hosting a bunch of labs that he does. Both he and Ryan Yeager put together a bunch of hacking labs, and they're all very diverse, anywhere from um, just Linux based to Active Directory hacking to Windows machines to whatever you name it. Tyler is a pen tester by day. He's now moving forward into his hacksmarter.org um, business. But one thing I wanted to do today is highlight and promote his page for one, which is hacksmarter.org, and we'll get to that here in a minute. And then also two is showcase some of the different labs that they've produced and put together on here for people who are interested in pen testing or ethical hacking, and to be able to get on there and get their hands dirty into some of these things. And they have different levels from easy to medium right now, and I'm sure uh, there'll be a whole lot more harder ones coming here shortly. So, but one we're going to showcase today is, you see at the bottom right here, we're going to do one of his labs called BankSmarter. It's a walkthrough. So those who have completed this, a lot of people have done write-ups, walkthroughs on this, and one of the things I like to do, as you know, is I like to do video walkthroughs to kind of show people, um, you know, what it's like to actually do the hands-on going through it versus just doing the hands-on and um, so doing the hands-on and kind of doing the walkthrough. So in today's walkthrough, when we go through this lab, for those who haven't done it yet, you may see some of the well, with this lab, there's going to be two flags that we're going to try and find. One is going to be a user flag, and the other one's going to be the root flag. So, and this is nothing but a Linux-based system. So, no Windows involved, no Active Directory involved, and we're just going to be given um, once we download our VPN configuration, we'll be able to get, and once we log on to the VPN, we'll get our target IP, and that's the only thing we're given out of this whole lab. Um, so we're going to run from reconnaissance, going through the cyber kill chain. We're going to go through reconnaissance. We're going to do some enumeration. We're going to do some exploitation, some post exploitation, and then in order to be able to capture both the user and the root flag. So um, let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. Okay, so as you can see here, like we talked about here, once again, Tyler, phenomenal. This here is his page, hacksmarter.org. And this here is a dashboard from my account login. So as we scroll through here, we can see this is subscription based. However, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday evenings, Tyler does live demonstrations on this stuff, and he does a segment. He'll open it up for 2 hours. So whatever lab he's working on, he does it for free. So he opens that lab up to anybody that wants to do what he calls hacking with him or hacking live with him. So as we can see here with his community, right here, streaming and write-ups. You are allowed and encouraged to make walkthroughs, live streams, videos, and solving the challenge. So I've already gone through this. However, I want to kind of give you a walkthrough of kind of like different tools, different processes, different mindset, um, so I've already read a couple write-ups. Zero Bob, he did a great job of doing a write-up on this. Um, if you're not familiar with Zero Bob, um, he's another guy that's heavily weighted into the community, the pen testing community. He does a lot of this stuff. He's got a lot of write-ups on both his GitHub page or GitHub page, and he's already done, I think, almost all of these labs in Tyler's environment. So, and has done write-ups on them. So one thing, when I've read a couple of his write-ups, and on this lab, there's going to be some variances between what Zero Bob did and then what I'm going to show too. So, as you know, if you've been through some of my videos, there's some toolings I kind of my go-to toolings. And as we go through this, you're going to see like I like MSF Console, which is in the Metasploit framework. So we're going to utilize that in this, where a couple other write-ups that I've seen that don't use it at all. So there's different variances. So if you read write-ups on the BankSmarter um, Lab, you'll see different tooling, different processes. But either way, we're able to get towards the same end goal, is to be able to get to that root flag. So with this, so we're going to kind of go through. We have our and what I'm doing here is I have this set up on the Restream. Right now, I believe I should be running on LinkedIn, YouTube, and let me see if it's actually on there. So it should be YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So hopefully they're going through. And okay, so the scenario right here, it says you're a senior operator on the HackSmarter Red team, tasked with a penetration test against a standalone Linux server. Remember, this is Linux, not Windows based. Your objective is to gain initial access and escalate privileges to root, emulating a worst case scenario where a threat actor successfully compromises a critical asset. So once we go over to the download in the VPN configuration, we're going to be given an IP address to the target, and the mission is to gain a foothold and escalate to root user, like we talked about, and retrieve the final flag root. Okay, so the only thing we're given here, we're not given a domain name. We're not given, the only thing we're given is an IP address. Okay, so we're going to conduct our reconnaissance from there. So let's open up, or actually, let's go to view course. And like I said, I already completed this, but we're going to go to systems. And the cool thing about with Tyler's courses is he gives you enough credits to be able to complete the course. So this course here started with, um, hey, Ginger Hacker's on, thank you. But if and Ginger Hacker, definitely give me some feedback if you can hear me. Hopefully this is going smooth, because I obviously don't. I'm not listening to myself in headphones. So with Tyler's courses, so if you sign up for these and you take this, so when you sign in and you go to start the course, just like I did, you're going to see where it says however many credits remaining, right? So I believe this started off with 87. So I've gone through what, 22, and you lose 2 credits an hour. So you can see how long it can actually take you going through this. So once we open this up, you can see right here, we've got our IP address. That's the only thing we're given. So 10.0.18.220 is the only IP we're given. So what we're going to do is we've already downloaded our VPN config. So we're going to go ahead and start this. I'm going to open up to my terminal, and I'm going to change directory over to BankSmarter. Okay, so one of the things that we want to do is I'm going to kind of show you, want to kind of go from the beginning here of once we get our IP address and what we want to do to be able to put it into our environment. And so we want to do a sudo nano etc hosts. We open that up, and as you can see, I've already done a few of his labs. So we've got IP addresses and then the domain names and stuff like that. So for here, we've already put in our IP address. So that way, if we do catch a domain name, we can put it in here, and then we can just reference the domain name later on versus just putting in the whole IP. So anyway, that's where we're at on this. Close that out. Okay, so one of the first things I did is, as you go through this, you want to be able to take notes, right? So one of the platforms I use is sorry about that. One of the platforms I use is Notion. Use Notion to take. Some people use Notion. Some use Obsidian. Others use just regular Notepad, or some will just take notes within inside their Linux environment through the mousepad or Vim, or just use Nano to be able to keep their notes. I like to use Notion, so that way I can take screenshots. I can copy paste. I am doing this from a virtual, my Oracle Box virtual machine, so it is set up for bidirectional copy paste. So, all right, so right here, we're going to start off. We need to do some type of reconnaissance just on that IP alone, right? So actually, let me go to downloads real quick. We'll open up another session because we're going to have to open up that VPN. CD downloads ls. All right, so this one here is the bank. So we're going to do sudo open VPN, and then challenge lab bank. All right, because we need to be able to connect to that IP. So if we don't open this up, we're not going to be able to connect. So our target IP was the 10.0.18.220. Our host, so from our attacking IP, is going to be right here, as you see on the screen, 10.200.1.210. Okay. So if you get into this later on, if you sign up for the HackSmarter, your IP is going to be different because everybody has a different standalone machine on this. So, all right, so we're going to come back to our HackSmarter or BankSmarter or our BankSmarter tab we got there. So now we need to do our reconnaissance. So what we're going to do is I like to use a tool called RustScan, and what we can do is move that, take and output the results to Nmap. So that way we can kind of figure out, okay, with this IP address, what ports are open, what services are there, what can we try to potentially exploit as we do our reconnaissance. So one of the things we like to do is we'll do a RustScan -A, and then we'll put in our IP, which is going to be the 10.0.1.18.220. And then we want to output that. So basically kind of mold that over to Nmap or transfer to Nmap. And we'll do a -A. So RustScan's going to run. It's almost like a lightweight Nmap, but it moves a whole lot faster. And as you can see, as this works right now, the very first thing it's showing is for our target IP is open port 22, which is our SSH port. So we'll let this run. It'll RustScan sometimes will take a minute. Plus, since it's working in conjunction with Nmap, it is, if anybody's, if you've worked with Nmap before, it can take quite a bit of time. Now, since we're not actually doing, a specific port that we're looking for, what it's doing is it's going through all 1024, all your 1000 common ports. So um, when it transfers over to Nmap. Okay, so as we can see here, we ran RustScan, and what it did is it gave us, RustScan just came up with port 22, right? So once it transferred stuff over to Nmap to do a little bit deeper dive, it went in Nmap only found that port 22 was open. Okay. However, those are TCP ports. And so there's got to be a little bit more that we can do. So we know that we have port 22 open, which means we can SSH into there, but first, before we can do that, we need credentials, right? So we need a username, we need password, but we also, will port 22 accept what authentication does it accept? Does it accept username and does it accept password, or is it just key based? So what we're going to do is from here we're going to enumerate a little bit further. So what we typically will do is I will highlight this and we'll put that in our notes right here. And also we can see that it's Linux machine. Okay. So as we scroll down, let's clear, open this up. And so now we want to be able to kind of figure out, okay, let's go a little bit deeper here. So let's go deeper into port 22. All right. So, because we need, like I said, we need to figure out what are the authentication methods here. So, and I don't even have username or password, but at least it'll give me some kind of notion of what I'm working with here. So we'll do an Nmap port 22 10.0.18.220, and then let's run that real fast. Okay, that just gave me that state. Okay, so now we're also going to run a script equals banner SSH2 enum. So we want to get algos SSH. Man, if I can type today, auth methods. Okay, so like we talked about, is it going to accept only key based, or is it going to accept username or just password, or both? So let's run this real fast. So as you can see, it gave us a lot more information than just running a standard Nmap against port 22, because that just gave us, oh, the status, it's open, great. But we would need a little bit further. So once we run that script with the banner, the SSH2 enum algorithms, and SSH authentication methods. So right down here, we've got supported authentication methods. It's going to be public key and password. So if we can find some credentials with even just clear text password, that's also going to help get us hopefully into port 22, or be able to SSH into the machine. Okay. So, and then as we scroll down here through, you can see all the algorithms that it accepts. So, all right. So the next thing we have to do is, since we don't have any username, password, or anything to be able to SSH into port 22, or into the target machine through port 22, we need to figure out what other ports. This isn't like we didn't run all 300 or 65,535 ports. We just ran the top 1,000. So we also, those top 1,000 are just running TCP ports. So what we also need to do is, do we have any UDP ports open? So that could be another way that we could exploit this machine. So from here, let's clear this, and then we're going to run sudo nmap. So if you run sudo, the difference between, so if you're not on root, right? And just for those that don't know, if you're not running root, which I could do root from here, but I like to stay on the RIC at port 0 versus the root at port 0. If you run nmap without sudo, it's only there's only certain things that Nmap is going to allow you to do. However, if you run it as root or you run it as a sudoer, it'll give you a little bit more oomph into it. So it'll run it a little bit more aggressive. So sudo nmap. We want to do UDP port, so we're going to run the UDP flag, which is .su or -su, and then -p. Now, some common initial foothold vectors that we can possibly look at for UDP. So different ports. So let's do 53, 123, 161, 500 -SV. We'll get a version, and then script equals banner SNMP. 161 a lot of times is running on UDP, and it's typically open. But since our initial scan, we only did TCP ports, we're going to kind of guess that maybe 161 is open. So we'll run this script here. We'll do a brute -pn. All right, and we're not going to outfile this. Okay, so no ports. No, that's not right. Oh, hello. We need to put in the IP address, huh? That'd be nice. 10.0.18.220. There we go. Okay, cool. So as we roll down through here, we do have some ports here that we just did through our UDP scan. So right now we searched for 53, 123, 161, and 500. So out of all these, 161 is open. The SNMP server or protocol, so which is version server 1 or version 1 server. What's also kind of interesting about this is on the SNMP brute, we've got valid credentials public. So in your community, this is public, and this is you'll be able to see what I'm talking about as we move further on. Okay, so 161 is open, so that maybe if we can try and exploit port 161 on this machine, it can give us back. We can find some kind of metadata within running a specific tool in that environment. So remember, I talked about different tools that we utilize, and one thing I kind of like to be consistent with is I love Metasploit framework. So one thing I want to do is run the MSF console, and since 161 does run SNMP, some others will use SNMP walk. That's another tool to be able to extract some metadata to be able to pull that out of port 161. However, just being consistent with all my other videos, let's run this here, and we're going to run use one of the exploits here is going to be an SNMP enum exploit. All right, so use exploit, and I want to say it's, or I'm sorry, it's going to be an auxiliary scanner SNMP enum. Hold on a second. There we go. Yeah, I didn't use the underscore. Okay, attention to detail. So, all right, so now we're here. So now what we won't need to do is let's do a show options, so that way we can show everybody what we're looking at. All right, so here what we're looking at is, let me get rid of, let me hide that so that way everybody can see. All right, so from here on our options, right? So we've got, since we did our enumeration with Nmap and we were able to find the public um, for our community that was already in there. So as I scroll up, so our community is going to be public. So that is required. Retries one, we'll just leave that. That's basically the default. We need to set our hosts, which is our target machine, and then we're going to leave everything else the same. Port 161, threads one, timeout, and version. Now version one, SNMP version 1 and 2, as we can see, SNMP version 1. So we'll just leave that as is. So let's set our hosts. Set our hosts. It's going to be 10.0.18.220. And then we're going to run. So now this here, what we're trying to do is exploit port 161. All right, we've already done our reconnaissance. We're enumerating. We've gone through kind of our IP enumeration, our port enumeration. So that type of reconnaissance is complete right now. Almost. So once we get to see the metadata that it's going to pull from port 161, we may be able to see, hey, you know what? There could be something in there that we can exploit here. So it is connecting. It's connected. And we're going to let that run for a second. So this here is going to the target machine, going to port 161, and it's extracting a lot of the stuff that we are possibly looking for. So as you can see, it's pulling all different processes. So right now, as you can see, process IDs, system names. So we can skim through all this, look for anything of interest, scroll back up. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff that it pulled, but once we go back to the top, all right, so after we hit run, first thing it's going to give us is our system information, right? So we've got our host IP, our host name. This is what it comes back as, IP, and then our IP. The description of the system that we're going into, which is our Linux system, or their Linux system, I should say, on the target. But what's interesting is, so if anybody's been to, if you've ever done a who is or, or whatnot, trying to look for registration, they give you contact names and whatnot and contact numbers. Um, Very similar to that here on when we're doing our SNMP enum. So what this pulls back, and this is the same information. So if you use SNMP walk, the other tool that I talked about, it's going to give you the same information, but this is just another tool to be able to pull that. So if you use SNMP walk, great. You use MSF console, great. Um, what's kind of crazy about this right here, and what's interesting to me is as I pull up the contact or as I pull up the metadata, it's got contact information. It's got admin, Lane.Staley, and then a colon, and then some type of um, some type of string behind that. Okay, so for those that are new to this, typically whenever you see a name like this, is like this here is set as Lane.Stanley, all right? So that kind of stands out to me as, okay, that could be a username. And then what really kind of intrigues me is there's a colon after that, and then followed by a string. That typically is going to signify a username and password, which right here we're extracting this. So we don't know if it is yet, but we're going to kind of make note of that. And so now that could be admin, Lane.Staley or Stanley, colon, and then that string right there. also highlighted location is Indianapolis. So as we move through this, we're looking for any other stuff that could be of interest. Um, so right now, our network IP, we've got our target IP, which we see, and then you've got your local host, which is your 127.0.0.1, and then your local ports. So as we saw, listening on any port or local address is port 22, which is what we were able to extract during our RUSSCAN/Nmap reconnaissance. However, if you look here, port 53, local port 53 is also open, but that's internally. So we would not have been able to see that from our RUSSCAN and Nmap scans. So will those come into play? Maybe, maybe not later on, but we'll see. So as we can see here, our local address, port 161, we've also got internal port 68, and then also these other ports. So this here is other information that is that we can skim through. And as you saw, the way we ran this is we could have actually outfiled all this to to be able to put on our machine, so that way we could analyze it later. However, we just want to be able to kind of pull that up here so everybody can see it. All right, so as we do this, as we enumerated all this and we discovered some potential credentials. So one of the things that we wanted to do is, let's exit out of this real fast. And so we've got a potential username and we've got potential passwords or potential password. So one of the things that we would like to do is, let's create a username file, and then we're also going to create a password file. Okay, so right here, what we've done is we've already created one, and we'll kind of show it out here, of what an example of what we made here. So let's do a cat bank name dot text. That's what I use for usernames. And so I kind of made a small compilation of usernames. So even though we saw Lane.Stanley, it could be made of a combination of different things. It could be, in what we saw on the MSF console printout was capital L and a capital S. So for Lane Stanley, right? However, we can make that into a bunch of different ways. So as you see here, what we did is we made public, we made administrator, uppercase, lowercase, Ubuntu, root, bank. Since this is BankSmarter, maybe use that. And then we use the different combinations of Lane Stanley's names. So as you can see, this was our username list that we created. And then also, we made a password list too. So let's do cat bank pass. And this is some different potential passwords that we want to be able to utilize too. So we created the username the username and the password lists, and we want to be able to take those and run those on Hydra to potentially brute force to see if there's a match between a username and a password for port 22 to be able to SSH into our target, which is 10.0.18.220. So that's going to be our next thing. So we created both lists, and what we want to do here is, let's run Hydra. So we're going to do Hydra dash capital L, and then we're going to do bank name dot text dash P bank pass dot text. So the capital letters. So if we were using just a single username, we do a lowercase L. If we were doing just a single password, it would be a lowercase p. So okay, so now let's do a T4. We'll be a little aggressive here. F -V for verbose, and then we'll do SSH. Oh, 10.0.18.220. All right. So now utilizing both our lists, we're using Hydra to attack port 22, their SSH, to see if we can get a hopefully correct username and password. Because remember, we started this whole thing out with just an IP address. We did our reconnaissance. We found out port 22 is open, and um, but we don't have any credentials, right? So our next step was we reconned for UDP ports, any potential exploits there. We found 161 is open. We know SNMP is typically on 161 is might be open, and there's some metadata that we can pull from that. So sometimes leaked credentials are in there as well. And in this case, we were able to find lane.stanley with a colon and then um, a string behind that colon. And then from there, we created our username and password lists, two separate lists. And now what we're going to do is try to attempt to say, okay, based off of these lists, do any of these match to where Hydra can go ahead, reach out to our target IP through port 22? And does this username and this password match to be able to say, look, we've got a match, we can log on and be able to get a possible foothold into that IP address through Secure Shell. So we're still running Hydra. As you can see, we're on as it's going. You imagine, so we didn't use like the whole RockU, RockU.txt file. That's got what I think over 1 million different potential passwords on it. So what we did is we made a small batch, even though this seems like a long haul that we're doing right here. This is actually very small. So even though when we did our when we pulled the information from our SNMP enum and it said lane.stanley with a capital L and capital S, like I said, that may or may not be the actual syntax or format that um, that is required to be able to get into the username standard for that organization. So we tried a bunch of different configurations, a lot of different combinations um, for lane.stanley. And then also we threw in a mix there. It's almost like a little salt mix of like admin, administrator, bank, stuff like that for our usernames. So it's still going through this process right now. As you can see, it's attempting every username versus each one of the passwords that's in there that we created. And we're on 253 of 325. So it's still moving through the system, still trying to brute force its way. Voila, look at this. All right, we've got something here. So we've got, you see everything is green on my screen, right? But we've got a highlighted port 22 SSH host 10.0.18.220 login lowercase lane dot lowercase Stanley with a password of that string. However, it's not even that complete string that was utilized or that we saw on the enumeration or on the metadata that we pulled from port 161 on our MSF console. It actually left off one of this single single quote. So that's why when you configure your username and password lists, make a different combination of different things. Don't just take it for granted that what you saw during your discovery is going to be gospel. So you want to kind of mix it up a little bit, and then look at this. Boom, we have this right here. So it says that, hey, look, we found this. This is good to go. All right. So the next step here is, let's go ahead and clear this out. Or actually, what we would do here is what we would save or take a screenshot, highlight it. You may want to highlight this right here with just the last attempts, and then go all the way up to the top with the command that you ran, and then highlight those, put those in your notes for later on, because as you see this password, we're going to have to reference this multiple times. So So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually, let's open up another tab so that way we can keep coming back to that. So let's do, now we're going to try to get into the machine or get a foothold into the machine through SSH. So SSH, and we're going to use these credentials, lane.stanley at 10.0.18.220. All right, now it's going to ask for the password. So now I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to highlight this password, copy it. I'm going to paste it. Look at that. We are on Lane.Stanley's machine. So SSH worked. So us doing a UDP search, like I said, when we did our REST scan and our Nmap, it only did the top 1,000 TCP ports. However, we wanted to kind of go a little bit deeper, see if there was any UDP openings in our typical UDPs that you would normally look for that could be exploited. 161 was it. We found that. We found credentials. If we were able to pull that through SNMP root with MSF console, SSH in the lane.stanley with the password that I found in Hydra, and boom, here we are on the machine. Cool. So since we're here, now we want to start doing some discovery. All right. So let's do, we can go through all, see where we're at. So let's do a parent working directory. We're in the home directory. Let's do ls. So we're going to list the different files and directories that are in here. This here is going to be key. So right here, we've got user.txt, which more than likely is going to be our, it's going to be our first flag, because when we go back over here, even though, okay, it doesn't show it here, but on the, for this lab, it's going to have just two flags that you're going to find. One is going to be the user flag. The last one's going to be the root flag. So as you can see, getting the user flag was not overly difficult. However, getting to the root flag is going to be, and we're going to walk through that process. So right here, what we found is we found BankSmarter underscore backup.sh, that file, and then we got user.txt. So user.txt is going to be the flag. So I'm not going to reveal that on here, only because you know, even though we have the password, I revealed that. I don't want to reveal the root flag. So, but from here, what we can do is let's see what the permissions we have. ls.lah. All right, so right here, now I've already overwritten this from the previous, my previous attempt through this. When you go through this, you're going to see the BankSmarter underscore backup.sh is going to be under somebody else's permission, and you'll see that when you get there. But I'm going to show you how we can manipulate that, even though we only had read writes on it. We can show you how we can manipulate that as well. So, all right. So let's see. Are there any other? Let me see if we can do. Here's another good one we can do. Let's do cd opt ls. We've got bank cd bank permission denied. No such file. Okay. All right. So we don't have. We can see it, but we can't get into that. All right. So let's do cd bank. Let's do. Let's go back here. And we'll do a cat, or let's do tail. Let's see, password. All right. So what we did is with it. So for those that are familiar with Linux, as we know, Etsy password used to be the old um, version of credentials to be able to try to find credentials in there. But then Linux moved that over to Etsy Shadow. However, with Etsy password, um, if we can actually access it, we can actually see and enumerate the users that are potentially also in that environment. So with here, I just wanted to check that out. We want to be able to see if there were any other users. And as you can see on here, we've got um, Lane.Stanley. We've enumerated. We are user one, or our UID or user ID is 1001. And then we also have Scott.Wieland, which is 1002, and Ronnie.Stone at 1003. Okay, so now we know we have two other users uh, potentially somewhere within inside this target. So let's go to our temp list of files in there, ls.lah. Okay, so when we go into our the temp folder and we want to be able to list permissions in here with the files and the directories, um, as we can see here, we've got a bash underneath Scott.Wieland. That's going to be key as well here because there's going to be some other stuff that we're going to enumerate here. So um, what else do we have? That's it right here. All right. So how can we get to Scott.Wieland? Well, since Scott.Wieland has a is running, there's a bash running on their machine. Um, this here is where, since I've already gone through this, this is where the BankSmarter underscore backup.sh file comes in. Because, like I said, originally when I went through the initial reconnaissance of this or initial discovery, BankSmarter underscore backup.sh was under the permissions of the write permissions of Scott.Wieland. We only had read permissions. However, since I've already gone back in, I've already been able to change this. So, um, and I'm going to show you how we did that. Unless, so we're going to do a cat bank smarter underscore backup.sh. All right. So since Scott.Wieland actually has bash on there, so what we wanted to do is we want to create a file. We had to remove the original file from our directory. And then what we did is we recreated that file under our permissions, being utilizing bin bash, copy bin bash into there. And then what another thing, and we have to be able to get a shell over to Scott.Wieland. So what we did is we used a tool called BusyBox. All right, it's a netcat. Use that in conjunction with netcat back to our IP address, and to be able to establish a reverse shell. So since Scott.Wieland actually has bash privileges, so we can, and he actually had write privileges on this file here, BankSmarter underscore backup.sh. Since we have removed the original file from our machine, and what we did is we recreated or nanoed a new, nanoed, we touched and then nanoed a new file with this data right here into that, and we saved it. So once we did that, now what we're going to do is we needed to pull over PSPY. PSPY is another Linux or Unix type tool that we can get running processes based off of this machine, or even in Scott, anything within inside this certain target environment. So one way we can do that is we're going to set up a. Let's come back over to our stuff, and we're going to go over to our tools directory. And as you can see over here, we've got a tool right here called PSPY 64. So what we want to do is be able to move that over to um, PSPY over to their or that target. So let's do a netcat dot or dash LVNP, and then we'll do port 4444, and then let's do PSPY 64. Okay, so for those that aren't familiar with netcat, what we're going to try and do is if you're familiar with moving files and transferring files, you can do a curl, you can do wget, stuff like that. However, if we have netcat, if we can do netcat from my machine to their machine, it just kind of makes things a little bit easier. So we're going to do a netcat PSPY, the file 64, through our listener, and then we're going to come back over to his machine, and we're going to do let's see. Let's say the syntax was, let's say it was the same, very similar. Netcat hash 4 PSPY 64. Oh wait, I don't want to listen. Clear. We want to be able to pull. What did we use for that? I think we just netcat. And we back to 10.0.18.220. Let's try this. PSPY 64. Oh, port number 4444. Jesus. All right. So as you can see, that went through. We've got PSPY 64 loaded onto the machine. So once we pulled that from our attacker machine over to lane.stanley, now we kind of have to modify the permissions on that. So we'll do a chmod plus X PSPY 64. Unless we still have that. Okay, so as you can see, as we modified it, right? So when we first pulled it over, PSPY 64, since we modified the permissions, now we can actually utilize it. It's highlighted in green. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and run PSPY 64. Actually, let's move that over to the temp file. Let's do ESPY 64 to temp CD EMP LS It doesn't want to seem to work here. ESPY 64. Why doesn't that want to work? Oh, look at that, because the file actually is not fully over yet. We don't have any contents of that, ls. Okay, so let's go back to TMP. And then we'll do a cat 10.0.18.220.4444 ESPY 64. Still zero in the contents. What are we doing here? Let's make sure we're still running, actually. Yep, we're still running. Oh, you know what? 10 dot. That was our target. God damn. That's why. How about we netcat to us? 10 dot. $200.1.210. There we go. It's the little things, right? We're putting in the wrong IP address. Pay attention. All right, so cool. Since we finally now got our IP address right, so what we do is we're pulling PSPY64 over into our temp folder on lane.stanley. As we saw here, we set up our listener. We did get a connection from our target IP, which is 10.0.18. So that's 43,942. So let's go ahead and clear that. ls chmod plus x, or let's make sure that the whole file came over. Yep. So we got 3 MB file right there, as you can see. So let's do a chmod plus x pspy 64. Now let's run it. Yes, pspy 64. Boom. There we go. We're putting in the wrong IP address, folks. All right, so PSPY, awesome tool. This here is going to enumerate all the different processes that are going on. It's going to be able to pull all the different UIDs that are running processes, so our user IDs. So remember, when we did our initial Etsy password enumeration for different types of users or different users with different UIDs, we saw that we are 1001 on that. Also, Scott.Wieland was 1002. And then Ronnie.Stone was 1003. And those are going to be key as we move through this PSPY 64 file or executable. So when we look at this here, as we scroll up, as it's running the commands in the user in the process IDs with the different processes, as we scroll down, one of the things that stands out to me is Ronnie.Stone. So how do we know that? UID 1003 with a process ID of 531. He's running Python 3, which through the opt bank. Remember, we were able to see the bank directory, but we couldn't access it, right? But Ronnie.Stone can. So he's running Python through the bank directory on an executable pty underscore server.py. That's going to come in handy later as well. So that's going to be one of these things that we want to be able to highlight and move over to our notes. So we'll highlight this whole piece right here and copy that into our notes, right? So let's go ahead and close that. Look at that, BusyBox, user ID. Cool. All right, so now we've got all that. We've done our processes. We notice that we've done our enumeration. So now what we want to do is we were already removed, or we already set up. So I told you, when you go through this lab, you're going to remove the backup or the BankSmarter underscore backup.sh file and modify that, because remember, Scott.Wieland actually had bash running, so we modified that. So let's see if we can go back and take a look. We'll scroll back up. Oh, we're not able to see it. Okay. But anyway, when you go back and watch the video, you'll be able to see what we actually put in there. All right. So now what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to get a shell on Scott.Wieland's account, right? So since he's running bash in his environment, and we're utilizing the script, so the BankSmarter underscore backup.sh, we modified that, even though we originally had it in our directory when we first got into lane.stanley, and we only had read permissions and not write. We removed the file, and what we did is we recreated the file with BusyBox netcat back to our machine and set up with executing the bin bash to be able to get to Scott's bash, so that way he can netcat back to our machine. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set up we're going to use another tool called Penelope. Penelope is going to be able to help us run a reverse shell back to So as you can see here, we've got Penelope. So we're going to CD Penelope, ls, CD Penelope, ls. Then we got Penelope.py. All right, so we need to be able to, once again, we need to move that over to lane.stanley. So let's do actually, let's just run that here. Python 3. We'll do Penelope.py dash port 4445. All right, Penelope is setting up a listener. Reverse shell on port 4445. Because remember, when we come back over to here, let's do a CD real quick, ls. And we're going to do a cat BankSmarter _backup.sh. So what we did is, remember, we originally had this file right here, the BankSmarter _backup or backup.sh. That was under the control of Scott.Whelan. However, when we removed it and we recreated it, we set a BusyBox netcat back to us on port 445, setting up bin bash, which, remember, bin bash or a bash that Scott Whelan actually had running on his system. So with that, come back over here, and since we ran Penelope, Penelope is going to reach back out. It's a reverse shell to be able to reach back out to port 445 because we told it under Scott.Whelan, hey, from our machine, from our attacker 10.200.1. Whatever that was, right here, 200.1.210, we put that into the contents of the bash file to be able to netcat back over. And now look at that. Now we run Penelope, and now we've got a reverse shell on Scott.Whelan. So now we've kind of one-upped it a little bit. So let's do an ls real fast. Let's do a cd opt ls cd bank ls. Look at that. So now, remember, when we try to enumerate this stuff or do a discovery through this stuff here, when we did it with Lane.Stanley's account, we could see the bank, but we couldn't get into that. We couldn't actually access that directory. So now with here, we can actually do that with Scott.Whelan. We can enumerate the bank directory, which in here we've got logs. We got that pty _ server.py that was running on Ronnie.Stones under his UID 1003. We've also got a sockets directory, and we've got start Ronnie. So let's do cd sockets ls live.sock. All right, that's going to come in handy. Okay, so now from here, since actually we're doing, let's see if we can cat that real quick. Live sock. All right. So right here, we're on Scott.Whelan. All right, let's go back. ls.lah. And look, so we're looking at permissions for different folders and files within Scott.Whelan's account. So once we do that, we see that we don't have any, we've got a local directory, but what's kind of standing out here too is our bash history, right? So whenever you execute anything in your under your account, a lot of that stuff is it's kept in the bash history, right? And what some of the stuff that we can extract out of there are different processes, different commands. different directories that were actually accessed, and sometimes you might find some credentials and stuff in there. So let's do. Let's see if we can't cat bash underscore history. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff here that we didn't do that is in here. So vim notes.txt, a lot of different commands that were done in the bash history. But one of the things that stands out here is that sockets.live or live.sock, right, under the socks. So echo socat, right, standard in out studio or standard in out Unix connect opt bank sockets live.sock. That means that there's a some type of secure tunnel going somewhere, and that's just another way to kind of netcat. So we would take that and we would highlight that for our nodes. So ls, let me see, cd home ls. And as we can see here, we've got us, this here's Scott dot, or this here is Lane dot Stanley, Ronnie dot Stone, Scott dot Whelan, and Ubuntu. So we're kind of enumerating some of the users within inside of there. All right. So from here, we went through the bash history. We found a potential link with the SOCAT standard in out Unix Connect to the opt bank sockets live.sock directory and where it's calling back. So let's take that. Let's see what that'll do. Wow, look at that. So remember, since we actually had bash on there, we used Penelope to get into his folder, right? So now now that we ran the SOCAT Studio Unix Connect opt bank sockets live.sock file, we just ran that on Scott Whelan, and look at that. Now we've got a reverse shell to Ronnie.Stone. So once again, we were able to not only own Lane.Stanley through our initial enumeration with just the IP address, MSF console, Ruscan, and Nmap, but now we were able to escalate or pivot over to, I should say, pivot over to Scott.Whelan. And you can make it a form of escalation too, because remember, Scott.Whelan actually had other permissions that we didn't. So we kind of escalated. So we did a lateral movement and we also escalated. And then also through Scott.Whelan, we found this SOCAT in his bash history, SOCAT standard in out Unix Connect, run that command, and now we've got access to Ronnie.Stone, okay, and opt.bank or opt/bank. So what can we do here? So now let's run ID. So let's run ID. So once again, on our Etsy password, we found that Ronnie.Stone was UID 1003. This confirms it. We're in Ronnie.Stone. He is 1003. However, group ID, bank team, and what groups is he a part of? The bank team group, the bankers group, and then Team Muck share, 1005, 1006, and 1007. But a couple things that stand out here: bank team and bankers. So if he's part of those groups, then what can we do? Can we actually access that stuff? Can we get into and enumerate or even discover different files and maybe maybe be able to find a way to get to root through the bankers? So all right, so our next step is all right, so let's do a find. Let's find the bankers. Find syntax for this group. Find group bankers ls. If I can get the syntax right, we wouldn't have to keep doing this. Let me see, find, and then groups, bankers, ls, to, let's do, try group, bankers, ls. All right, so this is interesting here. So what we found is the root is a user in the bankers group. And right here, USR local bin bank backup D. Okay, so that file right there, that path direct or that path. Okay, so that's interesting. So what we'll do is we'll highlight that and add that to our notes. Okay, so from here, let's do CD USR local. CD bin LAH. All right. So there we've got a bank underscore backup.py and bank underscore backup.d, which is the root in the bankers. So that's what we're looking for right there. So what if we were to run that? All right, brother, Ginger Hacker. Hey, thanks for coming by, man. I appreciate it. Let's do a back. We're going to run that backup D. See what that does. Starting backup for BankSmarter accounts, connecting to central ledger, verifying transaction logs, running internal Python verification, hashing account transactions, backup complete. Okay, cool. That's a backup command. So backing up all the accounts. Let's do bank underscore backup .py. All right, what is that Python file doing? USR bin environment Python 3. Okay, so this is just running a Python 3 with really kind of no, it's just running there's just like no definitive end on that. We can just run a Python 3 script. So what if we were to modify a script and run that through Python 3 under the direction of bank backup D? All right. Let's see what we can do here. There's no defined path. All right, so let's do an echo -e. Let's do a bash script. Bash and oops. Ah, come on. Oh man, messed that up. All right, so now we're back. Scott.Wieland. We're back to Ronnie.Stone. Okay. Let's go back there. Oh man. So now we're going to do an echo -e. Then hash n hash hp tmp python 3. Okay. Chmod plus x. Okay. Now we'll set a path. Path equals tmp path. Now we'll do usr local and then our bank underscore backup d. All right. That worked. Okay. So what we did here is since we found that once we catted this, that bankup D or the bankup.py, it was running the backup D was running just a regular Python script. So that way we can manipulate that. So that way we can run our own bash script over to the TMP Python file. We schmod that. So that way we actually would have permissions to be able to run that. So we run the path, the undefined path, or we define the path in the TMP file. In the path is the backup D file in the bin USR local bin directory. So when we did that, and we ran that regular Python 3 script for the bash, now we got root. So now we're able to get to the root directory. So let's do an ls. Let's cd back to root, ls. Let's, cd root ls. And there we go, root.txt. So once again, I mean, I can cat this out. That's going to be our last flag is going to be our root.txt, ls.lah. And as you can see right here, we can list all the directories and the files under the root. So we've got root.txt. It is written by root. We are root. So we'll be able to read that. I'm not going to cat that out because I want you to be able to, just like Tyler does, I'd like to be able to have you run through this. You can follow the same path as me, or you can find somebody else that did a walkthrough with a write, um, where they did a write walkthrough. Like I said, I like to do the videos to kind of show you how we got there. Um, but if I was to cat out root.txt, that's going to give me the root flag. So, and I don't want to do that and spoil that for anybody on the video. So the key thing I did give you was the lane.staley. So we were able to enumerate or be able to pull data out of the 161 UDP. We're able to pull. That's how we were able to get the credentials for lane.stanley. We made our own password and username list to be able to run that in Hydra, to be able to get initial foothold into the IP address, our target IP address, which was the 10.0.18.220. And then from there, we're able to conduct lateral movement and then also privilege escalation all the way to root, to where we could get, once again, we got the root, or we got the user flag in lane.stanley, and we're able to get the root flag escalating all the way to root. So hopefully you got something out of this. Once again, this is how we got here. You can go back, you can play the video. And what we'll do is we'll come back to here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the machine. We lost our connection with Scott.Whelan. We're going to exit, yes, 20 active sessions, exit. Let's get out of the VPN. We'll clear that. We are out, exit. Now, everything we did here, and one thing I recommend as you go through this, since you're going to be utilizing your own Kali machine, is because once again, this is not, even though we're using a VPN, we're not, this isn't like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me, where you can actually like use their machine, their attacker machine. You got to have your own Kali box or whatever you're attacking from. It could be your Kali. You could have an Ubuntu with a bunch of tools set up. Ubuntu machine. I mean, it's up to you. However, one thing as you go through this is keep a note, keep something that's going to be able to keep notes, highlight, copy, paste into your notes. You'd see me kind of looking back to my left, your right every once in a while, because these are notes that I pulled from going through this previously. And as you can see, as I went through it again, there was some things I forgot, just some little syntax things. But either way, we were able to get there. Let me go ahead and we'll come back to the dashboard. And if I highly encourage you, this is a big shout out to Tyler Ramsby and Ryan Yeager. They both come up with these machines. The Arasaka machine was actually developed by, oh man, let me see if it has it on here. Yep, Henry Lever. So if you guys follow Tyler on YouTube, Twitch, or LinkedIn, every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he's on. He does a live session. And one of the gentlemen one of the people that's on there, I want to say they designed this machine. So as you can see, there's a bunch of other machines that he has. I've already completed a bunch of them. So highly recommend Tyler's content. You can see just going through that one there, we went through BankSmarter. That is considered, and through Tyler's standards, this was considered a medium machine. So getting to lane.stanley was not overly difficult. However, trying to understand how you get to root can take a little bit more in-depth knowledge. And I'd be remiss if I didn't actually give a shout out to the internet and the AI tools to be able to help me through this. Um, because as you get stuck on different points, I kind of went through this, making it look like I knew exactly all the contents and context. But however, when you saw that I went through this here, view course, it started off with 87 credits. So, and when I believe you guys saw this when I was at 80 or 65. So, 87 to 65 is what, 22 and 2 credits an hour. So it took me roughly 10, 11 hours to actually complete um, that module. The BankSmarter Lab. So it took me about 11 hours to do that. But here, since we started this at noon, it took me about 90 minutes because I was able to kind of go back and use my notes. But what I wanted to do for this is not only kind of walk you through how we went from just having an IP in a Linux environment all the way to root, but I also wanted to highlight and give a shout out to Tyler Ramsby, hacksmarter.org, for putting together phenomenal machines. Highly recommend them. Definitely get on there, get your hands dirty. If you want to get into pen testing, ethical hacking, these are by far some of the better machines that I know that I've utilized. For those that follow me, you know that I'm almost done with my pen testing and ethical hacking grad certificate through SANS Institute. I've already completed GCIH, GPen, um, GRTP, GCPen, which is Cloud Pen, and now my last thing I'm working on is web application pen testing. So I'm kind of currently going through that. So as I work on these in the background, I'm actually working on my SANS courses as well, and then also as Port Zero, trying to also build. Getting requested for cyber awareness. So I'm putting together cyber awareness products for different organizations and also incident response planning documents as well. So um, a lot going on here at Port Zero. I love to do stuff like this. So I know I haven't come out with a video in a while. So I'm like, you know what? I got done with this lab. So let me try and highlight it. And I know giving props out to hacksmarter.org. I know Tyler highly recommends getting this stuff, um, out there doing write-ups and doing videos. So hopefully you enjoyed this. And once again, thanks for coming. I know it was a long segment, 90 minutes, and really appreciate you guys coming, learning a bit, and hopefully we can see you on Tyler's live streams at night. Like I said, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Get on his live streams, learn a ton. He does a lot of AMA on there. And Ginger Hacker was actually on my on the chat. So let me give a little shout out to Ginger Hacker as well. That's Andrew Crotty. So he had to drop off a little while ago. He was actually watching as well. So please jump on here. Get on hacksmarter.org. Subscribe. And like I said, on the live streams at night, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whenever Tyler does his live streams, he opens these up for 2 hours, free of charge, no cost to you. He calls it Hack with Me Live. So highly recommend it. Get on there, learn some stuff. Even if you're in the blue team stuff, this here is really good stuff to understand to be able to help defend your environment. If you understand through the hacker mindset, through the threat actor mindset, through an adversarial mindset, that'll make you a better blue teamer, in my opinion, because you can actually see these things. And if you understand what's in your environment, then you can understand what you need to be able to defend and how to defend it through the lens of a threat actor. So that's what Port Zero is all about as well. As you go back and you look at my videos, I love to be able to educate people on trying to learn through the lens of a threat actor. So hopefully you got something cool out of this. Tyler makes awesome products. Um, Ryan Yeager, along with Ryan and along with Henry Lever, that made the Arasaka device or machine as well. So um, hopefully to see you guys here next time. I'm hoping to be able to get another video out here shortly. I may do one here on Evil Win RM on how to utilize that. I know I've been getting requests for different tools, so and just showing little nuggets on how to be able to compromise or get, once you actually have credentials, how you can utilize different tools to be able to get into an environment. So I want to be able to continue to exploit the port zero dot local environment, my Active Directory network that I have set up, and we'll utilize some of these tools and we'll highlight those to be able to do that later on. So should be just be watching for more videos that are going to be coming out. Try and do more live streams. So thanks for watching, and I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe, stay secure, and stay vigilant.